You've got a new proposal that you're going to unveil here officially on Tuesday. What is this all about?
That's right. Well, the Well Washington Fund is about investing in critical silos of public sector spending at the same time that the Trump administration is defunding them. The Well Washington Fund is about three H's: healthcare, specifically Medicaid, Medicare, housing, and higher education. These are the three silos of public sector spending that the Washington State Office of Financial Management has identified as most at risk due to Trump's H.R. 1 budget, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, as well as deep cuts to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So I think there are going to be a lot of people in Washington State, especially here in the 43rd District, that are going to be looking to the state legislature for leadership on protecting against the worst impacts of federal austerity budgeting, and that's what the Well Washington Fund is all about.
And this is modeled after the Jumpstart tax in Seattle?
It has a few key differences. It was excellent to see the shepherd of the payroll tax get elected to the office of Seattle mayor. And what the Well Washington Fund is really going to do is it's going to say, we're going to tax very large corporations, in fact, the largest 2% of corporations in Washington state, and subject them, in essence, to the same additional Medicare tax that all high-earning employees have been paying on their federal tax returns since 2013. So this is an invitation. It's an invitation for the largest Washington state corporations to join their employees in supporting the social safety net. Just as the additional Medicare tax at the federal level funds vital services, at the state level, it's going to be supporting cash assistance programs, higher education, housing programs, and healthcare here in Washington state.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this point, but weren't you trying to get some traction on this issue last year?
Well, Senator Rebecca Saldana dropped a version of this bill earlier on this year, Senate Bill 5796. She did great work on that bill. This, I want to say, is a step beyond, because what we did not know at the time that the senator dropped her bill earlier in this year was the full extent of the cuts that Washington state was going to be seeing as a result of H.R. 1, as a result of government shutdown, as a result of deep cuts to the Housing and Urban Development Department at the federal level. And so now that we have that policy context, I think people are going to be looking to us to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to protect those programs. And so that's what my bill is about. And I'm going to be very happy to work with Senator Saldana over in the other chamber to make sure that this is delivered to the governor's office early next year.
I can hear people already saying, didn't we just raise another $8 or $9 billion in taxes in Washington state?
Well, you know, there are some people who I do think look at state spending and maybe have a few qualms about that. And the question that I would ask them is, well, which areas would you prefer that we divest from? We spend most of our money in Washington state on public schools. Maybe you think our public schools have too much money. Maybe you think healthcare is too available. Maybe you'd like to see fewer people be able to access higher education. Maybe you think childcare is actually too accessible and we need to roll back on that. The point is, people are looking to the state legislature for real leadership on supporting our programs. And the fact of the matter is that the corporations that are going to be subject to the tax which funds the Well Washington Fund just got a massive tax break to the tunes of billions of dollars via H.R. 1. So they are not going to miss the money, but everyday people of our state will miss the vital services that would have to shutter if we did not protect them with state action, and that's what the Well Washington Fund will do.
Is there any other option in your mind, cutting spending somewhere else in the state budget besides raising new taxes?
Well, one of the largest areas of spending that we have in Washington state is actually the Department of Corrections. So I would look in that direction if people are thinking that maybe state largesse has gotten so big that people are not getting the services that they need. But I suspect, just based off of the results of the most recent capital gains tax referendum, where 2 out of 3 voting Washingtonians elected to continue taxing the rich to fund early learning and childcare, my suspicion is that the public is on our side on this issue. Everyday people, working families, public school teachers are all going to be on our side on this issue in this fight to make sure that we're funding vital services by taxing the ultra wealthy and the biggest corporations in our state.
So I had a conversation with Chris Corey, your colleague on the Republican side of the aisle, who he flat out said this is a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would point to in this discussion that we'll hopefully get to have with my Republican colleagues in the House of Representatives is the fact that the Well Washington Fund, in part, bolsters spending on cash assistance programs. And the fact of the matter is that you see a much higher density of people who rely on supplemental nutrition assistance programs in Republican districts than you do in blue ones. In Mason County, Franklin County, Benton County, other counties that are GOP-led in the State House of Representatives, you see people, rates like 1 in 7, 1 in 6, 1 in 8 people, depending on cash assistance programs like food stamps. So we're fighting for them too. I understand that there's going to be a philosophical difference that some of the GOP leadership has, but I do not think that they want their constituents to starve or to go without access to cash assistance programs, and so that's what this bill is going to help fund, and it's going to benefit people whether or not you're in a blue LD or a red one.
So he said it today, and you've heard this before from the likes of Microsoft President Brad Smith, that you start taxing businesses more and more, they're just going to move out of state. And we've even seen here in the last few months, Amazon moved jobs out. They've cut jobs in Seattle where a similar tax was put into place. Microsoft has cut jobs.
Right.
This is just going to be a tax, some would argue, that pushes those businesses out of state.
Right. Well, I would say a couple of things in response to that. First and foremost, many of those corporations have been shedding jobs because of their investments in AI, which is designed to replace human labor. So let's not act like it was tax policy that compelled companies like Microsoft to shed a lot of jobs when they are investing in technology that is designed to divest from human labor. The second component of that is that I think some of these corporations are very well represented. Their point of view is very well articulated in Olympia. 6 of the largest corporations in Washington state spent $2.1 million lobbying the state legislature to get their viewpoint heard in the 2025 legislative session. As somebody who represents the 43rd LD, an LD that is 73% renter, that has a lot of working families, teachers, nurses, people who depend on public institutions. I'm much more worried about what would happen if they are displaced or if they decide to leave Washington state because they couldn't get childcare or because funding for schools was not where they hoped it would be or for a variety of other reasons. So I think that those are the people that I center in my policy making. And the third point on that is that, Microsoft and some other big companies got a pretty big tax break earlier this year from the federal government. So I think that they're spoken for at the federal level, and there are a lot of people who are not spoken for here in Washington state. And we're talking about everyday people that are going to really be happy to see something like the Well Washington Fund pass.
So even with that argument, I can see some saying, okay, well, we'll give Shaun the point of, hey, they got a federal tax break.
Right.
But in the state of Washington, there's nothing stopping Amazon or Microsoft from shipping those jobs to Washington, D.C. or shipping them to Vancouver, B.C., where the tax policy is better.
Right. There's also, so far, has been nothing from stopping them from divesting from human labor altogether via AI and data centers, other technology that is designed to replace human labor, which is much more responsible for shedding a lot of those jobs that you're talking about than any tax policy that is passed. So I would ask that we be consistent in some of our scrutiny. I definitely understand the concern around what we're going to do to make sure that major corporations can continue to do business here. The fact of the matter is that they also benefit from a climate where people are excited to spend their dollars and raise families and send kids to school and go to school in Washington state. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, for every federal dollar that is spent on that program, it actually generates $1.50 in economic activity. So the Well Washington Fund is going to be good for the overall business climate of our state. And that's a perspective that I look forward to bringing to the table as we urge this bill's passage.
So the last thing I'll ask you is about the issue of affordability, which, as you know, it was a big topic of conversation in the most recent slew of elections, and including the Seattle mayor's race. And there's this argument that can be made that you continue to add taxes to somebody's bottom line, it makes it less affordable.
Right. Well, I have been a proud member of the Seattle Democratic Socialists of America since January the 4th, 2017. So these conversations about what it means to make our cities, our states more affordable is something that we have been very active on. I look at affordability from the vantage point of the 99%, not the 1% of the largest corporations that are going to be subject to the payroll tax that funds the Well Washington Fund. And the fact of the matter is that there are more of us than there are of them. There are much more working families, there are more renters, there are more students, there are more retired public employees, people that really want to see a strong social safety net. That's the 99%. So I look at it from the vantage point of what does it mean for us to build an economy that works for everybody. And I think that has to entail some of the largest corporations that have done pretty well by themselves in Washington state, thanks to some pretty large tax breaks and other subsidies that we've given them over the years. So let's make sure that we're spreading the wealth around and we see shared prosperity for everyday people across our state. And that's what the Well Washington Fund is all about.